Is there a way to hold complexity, to take the weight of Columbus's sins and remember the providence that launched the gospel beyond Europe? That tension must be held, else we'll allow the beasts behind the narrative curtain achieve what they want, for us to just quit trying to learn anything. Today is part 2 in our little mini-series on Columbus, and just like in part 1, we're taking another break from the textbook. In fact, if you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'd recommend you starting there. Because in that episode, we did something important. We listened to a respectable dissenting voice, Andrew Ganner, an everyman who didn't oppose Columbus based on woke left ideology, but what he perceived as Catholic principles. Even more, he didn't fall into today's childish binary noise. He didn't just yell. He invited us to wrestle with nuance. I don't doubt Ganner's Catholic faith. It's not my place to do so. But after heaping nothing but praise on him last time, because I felt he deserved it, I want us to ask the question today yet again. Do any of us know it all from the past, given what nefarious things have been done over the years to our textbooks? Do we know who has had control over the book publishers for a long time now? So here's where we've been concerning complexity of information, something that can be applied to modern day events as well. 1, we listen, not to surrender, but to sharpen. 2, we interrogate, internal biases, external narratives. That's the metacognition we discussed last time. And 3rd, we claim the Catholic way, which means the universal way, as an antidote to modern psyops. If Columbus's legacy is complex, so are ours. To defend faithfully, we must ask hard questions about history, about heroes, about our own stories. Yes, about the Judases of the church, all the while remaining firm in the Christ who handpicked him. The lessons in this course, too, in fact, as I remember it, have already given us some sense of the troublemaking some folks are there to make among the Catholic faithful. I thought Ganner deserved the time because I wanted to show my viewers in this age of yelling on the internet and owning people that the notion of some people disagreeing with each other based on well-meaning thought does still exist. He wasn't an ex-formerly known as Twitter screamer. He comes off as a researcher, a serious reader, a thinker who knows at least some basics when it comes to the rules of rhetoric, something not even people on our side always practice, even though they happen to get things right. Ganner made the case that maybe the legacy of Christopher Columbus isn't quite as simple or as glorious as many traditional Catholics would have us believe. That's worth listening to, because I don't disagree with the nuance of it. Where my disagreement lies is in the pillars, the undercurrents, the big ideas we've been exploring so far in this course. Context, motives, seeds. While modern culture wants to toss Columbus into a fire, and some thoughtful critics like Ganner want to, with good intentions, use Christianity to do it, there's still a more rugged, more historical, more traditional, more biblical Catholic voice in all of this that has been ignored. But that should come as no surprise, because our church itself has been ruptured along the same lines. Many have pointed to the 1960s as the shift, as have I, since it provides such an obvious marker. But if you look at the popes and politics and what Pius X was so concerned about at the turn of the 20th century, you'll see that those troublemakers we've been sneaking into our discussions have been up to no good for a really long time. And what's more, they've been patient. I had a Protestant friend suggest I not forget about them when it came to my videos. I don't. I don't forget about them and haven't in many of my videos and all the articles I've written since 2020. As a whole, my work does that. But this history course is different because I need my audience to know I am being very specific. I need my family to know. This rift we have in the church right now is not just some sibling rivalry. It's deeper and more nefarious. And I aim to, somehow, some way, get as many people as I can to see it and leave the rest to God. Incidentally, it is 2 Protestant friends who are converting to traditional Catholicism and a number of students who inspired this. They recognize it as the true faith and recognize what their pastors had been telling them about Catholicism as something else entirely. My point in digressing there a bit is to circle back to the point. Our enemy is and always has been patient. This goes back a long time, well beyond the birth of America. Today, we don't attempt to disrespect Ganner and those like him. We don't try to own him like the internet culture does today, in the spirit of the Eighth Commandment and being responsible for every word that comes out of our mouths. And now, without any further introduction, we venture into another side to the Columbus portrait, and we do it with charity and humility. When Christopher Columbus set out across the Atlantic in 1492, he wasn't merely chasing spices, maps, or personal glory. He was chasing souls. That may sound strange to modern ears, dulled by cynicism and scandal, but the historical record and Columbus's own words make this one thing clear. He believed he was on a sacred mission. Quote, "I had given a report to your highness about the lands of India and about a prince who is called Grand Khan, how he had sent to Rome to ask for men learned in our holy faith in order that they might instruct him in it. Yet the Holy Father had never granted his request, and thus so many people were lost, falling into idolatry and accepting false and harmful religions. And your highnesses, as Catholic Christians and princes, lovers and promoters of the holy Christian faith, thought of sending me, Cristobal Colon, to see how their conversion to our holy faith might be undertaken." A cynic might call this political rubbish, but the faithful Catholic knows what pull God can put on the soul when other people's souls are in trouble. If we are to take his words with charity, at face value, Columbus saw himself truly as a vessel of providence, the one at that moment in time to help. A messenger of Christ to a new world. Remember, there was no internet back then. No heroic influencers all trying to spread the message. It was Columbus, and probably from his vantage point, Columbus only. He studied the writings of St. Augustine and the Church Fathers. He copied out passages of Scripture by hand. He believed that prophecy pointed to his voyage. And maybe most importantly, he begged for help not from kings, but from a queen who loved the faith, Isabella of Castile. She wasn't perfect, neither was he. Why do we always have to say that? Why do we always have to say that when we're defending people? But she knew. She knew what he was trying to do, and she believed in the spiritual call. Rebuttal to the Lies About Columbus by Philip Miracle. We are at the end of the 16th century. The Habsburgs reign in Spain, and from there extended their Catholic empire all over the world. With globe-straddling territories and victorious armies, Spain was hated by Protestants. Facing defeat on the battlefield, these Protestants turned to the pen to try and defame their hated Catholic enemies. In the Netherlands, printing presses churn, spreading tales of Spanish infamy, with no bother to adhere to reality. That old, ill-informed habit of denigrating Spanish accomplishments persists to this day, finding a curiously modern incarnation in the controversy surrounding a non-Spanish figure, the Genovese sailor Christopher Columbus, who was, nonetheless, sponsored in his trips by the Spanish Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. Today it is becoming increasingly popular to depict Columbus as an archetype of colonial wickedness. He who once was venerated in schools is now defamed for a whole host of alleged crimes. Influenced by this defamation campaign, many Americans are replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Often he is blamed by extension for all the atrocities committed by later explorers. Personally, he is depicted as a gold-crazed madman. But these stories are false. Like the Black Legend of the Inquisition, an investigation into the actual documents of the period reveals a startling different story. Further, these myths are not only perpetuated in our days, but they are actually increasing, indicating no regard for intellectual integrity. From newspapers to blogs, the story that Columbus sailed in 1493 and stole all he could see continues to spread with ever more virulent permutations. Like a snowball traveling down the mountain, a single lie gains in size and momentum as other untruths and exaggerations are added to it, until the myth becomes entrenched in the public imagination and people assume it is the truth without question. It is a sad testament to the low intellectual level to which our modern times have sunk in respect to truth. Few researchers could claim Columbus was perfect. He was not. But to unquestioningly subscribe to the myths surrounding him is to buy into a highly ideological lie that holds historical truths subservient to ideological agendas. Today I respond to the following myths slandering the name of Columbus, readily found on the internet. Myth 1. Columbus never set foot on America. On Columbus's third and fourth voyages, he landed in Central and South Americas. Thus, Columbus can be rightly said to have discovered the Americas, regions previously unknown to Europeans. To anyone else but North Americans, the three Americas, South, Central, and North, form an ensemble with many points of unity. It was inhabited by Indians and was colonized almost at the same time by Europeans. This general process started with Columbus discovering the Isle of San Salvador in 1492, and it is more than logical that the discovery of one part of the New World should be considered the discovery of the whole. The difference is that most of Central and South Americas were colonized by Catholics, while North America was initially colonized by Protestants. Hence it is understandable, therefore, that the Protestants would induce North Americans to believe that they are different and superior to their Central and South American brothers, and the only ones who deserve the title of Americans. It is based on this pride and lack of objectivity that this myth took root. Myth 2. Columbus brought violence and disease to the Indians. The Native Americans were used to warring, committing genocide, enslaving, and even practicing cannibalism long before Columbus. The word cannibal itself is a derivation of the name for the Carib tribe, the same that gave the Caribbean its name. Therefore, it is completely out of reality to attribute all these evils to the Europeans who set foot in the Americas. Disease was an unintended side effect of Spanish contact, and would have occurred regardless of who traveled between Europe and the New World. Indeed, it is not difficult to understand that since the Indians had not developed resistance for the habitual diseases Europeans had, when the latter arrived in the Americas, their diseases produced devastation among the Aborigines. There are also quotes reinforcing other myths by taking single sentences of Columbus's writings in an attempt to portray him as a monster. From racist to child trafficker, Columbus is accused of a whole host of atrocities, relying on citations from his journal to prove the point. All one must do is look at the original documents written by him and his record keepers to see that these depictions are egregiously false. The book, The Northman, gives us the text. Edited by a Yale professor, it is translated and freely available in multiple formats here. The following are some commonly quoted lines. Myth 3. Columbus offended the Indians based on the quote, "Savage cannibals with dog-like noses that drink the blood of their victims." Response. Alleged to be Columbus's description of natives, in reality, this was Columbus's recording the description given by Taino Indians about the cannibal Carib tribe. Columbus himself dismissed these claims as exaggerations, until he and his men came across a village of cannibals and found body parts of men being cooked. See pages 138, 157, 174, 183, and 290. Myth 4. Columbus despised the Indians based on the quote, "For with 50 men they can all be subjugated and made to do what is required of them." Response. This entry is presented to try and depict Columbus as a power-hungry conquistador, evaluating potential Indian victims. In reality, this was Columbus relating to the monarchs how establishing fortresses to protect trade routes did not seem necessary because the islands seemed quite safe. Later experience proved the natives could be quite warlike, but this initial observation is still misquoted to try and paint him as a ruthless conqueror despite his explicitly friendly gestures toward the Indians. See page 114. Myth 5. He sold children into sexual bondage. Response. This particular falsehood would be laughable were it not so egregious. The lie has its origin in a letter Columbus sent back to Spain, wherein he states, "There are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand, and for all ages a good price must be paid." An appalling indictment. However, citing this quote out of context removes one absolutely vital component of the text. It is explicitly Columbus complaining to the monarchs of this atrocity. His very next paragraphs state that these traffickers did not deserve water in the sight of God or the world. Far from engaging in such activity, Columbus tried to suppress this behavior on his return to Hispaniola and begged the monarchs that more upright men be sent as colonists. Despite this, there are actually those who cite this quote out of context in an attempt to create the narrative that Columbus somehow approved of child exploitation. Anyone who bothers to read the text they are citing can see through this falsehood. The mendacity of those who persist in spreading this lie is staggering, particularly given how easily the truth is verified. See page 378. Given the falsehood spread about Columbus, it is worthwhile to note the behavior that actually characterized this great explorer, who is at the center of so much controversy. The 1906 translation of Columbus's voyages show us the following. 1. Columbus was consistently the only restraining force over his otherwise lawless men, forbidding them to pillage or steal from the villages abandoned by the Indians. See pages 125, 131, and 132. 2. He forced his men to free several Indians that they wanted to enslave. See page 219. 3. He consistently affirmed and demonstrated that the expansion of the kingdom of Christ, not the acquisition of riches, was the primary objective of his expeditions. Even his enemies admitted this, merely asserting that he did not do a good enough job of it. See pages 142, 160, 180, 187, 192, 253, 207, 355, 361, and 412. 4. Columbus insisted that his men do no harm to the Indians and that they treat the natives well. See pages 158, 175, 180, 191. In his eyes, the natives were subjects of the king. See page 187. And he expressed great admiration for them. See page 196. 5. When the natives attempted to give him gifts, Columbus insisted that they be given something in return, since it was unjust to take something valuable for nothing in return. See page 192. 6. When cannibals attempted to capture some Spaniards, it was Columbus who restrained his men from killing in defense, commanding them to frighten the Indians away. They would also free several natives captured by the cannibals, who were being kept as sex slaves and future meals. See pages 291 to 293. 7. Columbus received tribal dignitaries of a local chief, refused their offer of supplies and gold, and then sent them away gifted with clothing. See page 298. 8. Columbus urged that any gold be obtained through fair trade and not through plunder, which he feared would bias the natives against converting to the Catholic faith. Page 416. The man who emerges from the original documents written by Columbus is radically different from the revolutionary narrative about him. Seeing as these myths can be so easily refuted by free and open translations, the mendacity of the myth spreaders becomes apparent. Those who would perpetuate these slanders in the face of such obvious evidence are, at best, guilty of grave ignorance. More realistically, they are culpable of intellectual dishonesty. Society deserves honest representation of facts, rather than ideologically motivated distortions. Those who spread these lies about Columbus are following a revolutionary agenda and build their foundation upon falsehoods. Simply put, if they are willing to lie about such obvious things, what can be believed about anything else they say? In similar fashion, here's what OAN had to say.
Let's play a game of fact versus fiction, shall we? The left claims Christopher Columbus committed mass genocide. Is that fact or is that fiction? It is fiction. Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas in 1492. At that time, there were approximately 20 million indigenous people living here. Within 200 years, approximately 95% of those 20 million were dead. That part is historically accurate. But what killed them? How did Christopher Columbus and his men carry out such mass extermination? Well, they didn't. Nearly all of the 19 million natives who died after the arrival of the European settlers were killed by disease. Smallpox, the flu, TB, malaria, the plague, measles, cholera, etc. These diseases came with European settlers and the natives had no immunities to them. The diseases, and not Columbus, wiped out the native populations. The second claim from the left, Christopher Columbus was a brutal tyrant. Fact or fiction? This is fiction too. A professor at Stanford University named Carol Delaney says most of the death came after Columbus's time in the Americas. Delaney says, and I quote, "They're blaming Columbus for the things he didn't do. It was mostly the people who came after, the settlers. I think he's been terribly maligned." In fact, Columbus prohibited his men from raping and plundering the natives, and when two of his men did it anyway, he executed them. In his writings after his journeys, Columbus defended the natives, and he adopted the son of a chief. That brings us to our third claim from the left. The colonialist white settlers stole America from the natives. This is neither fact nor fiction, it's a matter of context. The history of the world is a history of war and conquest. That's what all peoples did. That's what the natives did to each other. That's what Columbus did to the natives. He conquered the Americas. That being said, the left suggests Columbus was worse than everybody else of that time, and that is fiction. The left claims they have proof that Columbus was evil because of a letter detailing the evil actions of Columbus. The problem is that document was written by Columbus's chief political rival who hated him. It'd be like asking Hillary Clinton to write the historical account of the 2016 election against Donald Trump. That letter was nothing more than revisionist history from the 15th century recycled by modern leftists 5 centuries later. The next claim from the left, Christopher Columbus owned slaves. This is true, this is fact. Columbus took natives as slaves. There's no excuse for that. It's unequivocally wrong to enslave another human being, period. But the left ignores the historical context again. The Native Americans were also famous for enslaving each other. And the Pope at the time declared cannibals to be slaves. Still doesn't make slavery right, but the left purposely leaves out historical context to push their radical leftist narrative that Columbus was evil and therefore white men in 2018 should pay the price. The left peddles this revisionist history as an excuse to justify big government policies that take from the haves and give to the have-nots. And they use race to tell you it's the fair thing to do. But it's not fair, and the narrative is a lie.
Columbus's mission wasn't just backed by a queen. It was praised by the popes. Pope Alexander VI, despite his moral failures as a man, celebrated Isabella's desire to convert the natives. We've seen that in previous lessons. And because of this, by extension, Columbus's journey that she sponsored and its connection to evangelization. That the name of our Savior be carried into those regions, we exhort you very earnestly in the Lord, and by your reception of holy baptism, whereby you are bound to our apostolic commands, and by the bowels of mercy of our Lord Jesus Christ, enjoined strictly, that inasmuch as with eager zeal for the true faith you design to equip and dispatch this expedition, you purpose also, as is your duty, to lead the peoples dwelling in those islands and countries to embrace the Christian religion. Nor at any time let dangers or hardships deter you therefrom. We of our own accord, out of the fullness of our apostolic power, by the authority of Almighty God, conferred upon us in blessed Peter and of the vicarship of Jesus Christ, which we hold on earth, do by tenor of these presents, should any of said islands have been found by your envoys and captains, give, grant, and assign to you and your heirs and successors, kings of Castile and Leon, forever, together with all their dominions, cities, camps, places, and villages, and all rights and jurisdictions, all islands and mainlands, found and to be found, discovered and to be discovered. We assign to you and your heirs all islands and mainlands discovered and to be discovered, with the proviso that the inhabitants be instructed in the Catholic faith. Remember, the Pope here is acting as the vicar of Christ, not as the human. It is the office I present here. As a quick catechesis, Catholics believe this because Christ handed Peter the keys to the kingdom. Peter, who was incredibly impetuous and flawed. The keys, in the line of the keys handed to David, a king. So if we're going to say the church had no role here, or that the mission was merely political, we're lying to ourselves. Such cynicism, regardless of the sins of Catholic men on those voyages, betrays an ignorance of Christ's ancient command to spread the gospel. The Pope was doing that through the vessels placed in his path. This is why this course can't be for Protestants, because at its very premise, it holds that the Catholic faith is the one true faith instituted by Christ himself in 33 AD. Not Luther, not Calvin, not any of these other pastors from centuries past. Not Stephen Anderson, not Billy Graham, not Rick Warren. No one. Jesus Christ. This course isn't trying to get Protestants to understand that. Sadly, it is trying to get Catholics to understand that. Columbus may have fallen short in many ways. This makes all the sense in the world when you consider such a strong faith clashing not only with politics, but more insidiously, with a certain number of the natives they would encounter on that island, and what their food of choice was. But his vision, the vision, from the very start, was explicitly Catholic, universal. To look at what would follow in any other way is simply dishonest, at best. At worst, it is an attempt to sully the Catholic mission to evangelize the world. This wasn't colonization for greed's sake. It was conversion. It was mission. It was a desire to expand the kingdom of Christ on earth. Again, modern thinkers in this American republic, even lay Catholic ones, even my family members, some of them, might have no idea that that is what Christ actually wants. Not a democracy, not a republic, a kingdom, his kingdom, with us as his servants. Why do you think every throne throughout history has been made out to be bad in the textbooks? Were there bad kings and queens? Of course there were. Were all of them bad? Of course not. You know the answer to that. Look at what's happening in America today with our republic or our democracy. How's that working out for us? Think about that in relation to a lesson on a Star Wars clip I put out last summer and reproduced just a couple of weeks ago. This is like the Star Wars clip I showed you with the missing planet. It's the gravitational pull of all these anomalies and seemingly circumstantial evidences, and it all is gravitating toward a void. And what you have to ask yourself is, why is that void in place? Who made the void? Where does the money go? Where's the children? All of these things. Understanding the void is the key. Recognizing the void is the key. You don't have to understand every single little anomaly and evidence around it. Gravitationally pulling toward it. If the void is there, there's a good chance there's a problem. That cut can be found in Socratic 101, the playlist, on YouTube, and the full video can be found on Rumble. I link it in the description. That doesn't mean every choice he made, Columbus I mean, was perfect. But it does mean we can't rewrite history to pretend they should have known how societal frameworks would have changed over the next several hundred years. It means we can't revise that history to then make it a given in textbooks that the gospel wasn't central to his cause. To do so is beyond wrong. It is wicked. And those who started that purposely have had their reckoning, one way or another, in this life or the next, for the chains they've put on civilization, for the chains they've put on you and me. You want to condemn slavery? Let's condemn that one.